I just want to see my balance." The voice was quiet but steady, without a stutter, without fear. The entire VIP room looked away at once, as if that sentence were forbidden in a place like this. A boy, barely 10 years old, wearing simple sneakers, a second-hand t-shirt and slightly messy hair, stood in front of a glass counter in the most exclusive financial building in the city, while dozens of adults laughed as though they had just heard the joke of the year. He didn't even blink. He repeated himself, now looking straight at the manager. "Sir, I just want to check my balance. Here are my password and my ID." Before we go on, the narrator in your head might say, "Imagine where you'd be watching this from, your city, your country, and remember to stay with the story." On the other side of the counter, the manager, a tall man with slicked back hair and a forced smile, let his jaw slowly drop. He looked the boy up and down as if he was seeing someone hopelessly lost in the wrong place. "You?" he asked, frowning. "You want to see your balance? From what account, kid?" The boy answered without hesitation. "From my school savings account, from my piggy bank, from the loose change account." People around them had already started laughing. It was a cruel kind of laughter, the laughter of those who believe money defines a person's worth. A man in a gray suit, holding a glass of expensive champagne, leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered, "He must be some cleaner's kid. Slipped in here through some loophole and thinks he's important." More laughter. But the boy didn't flinch. He simply held out his hand, a small but steady hand, holding a clear plastic folder that contained an account number, an original document, and an access authorization. "This is the account. My grandfather opened it when I was born. He passed away last week. My mom says it's in my name now." The word "passed" dimmed the noise in the room for a moment, but the arrogance in the air still dominated everything. The manager folded his arms, laughing mockingly. "Kid, this is an exclusive area. Ordinary accounts are downstairs. This floor is for high-profile investors, clients who move millions, not kids who still play video games." The boy took a deep breath, looked at the manager calmly, and replied, "I know exactly who I am and where I come from, and I don't want to take any risks. I just want to check my balance." The woman next to the man with the champagne nudged her husband's arm, trying not to laugh out loud. "Honey, record this. It's going to go viral." Meanwhile, the security guard began walking toward the boy, ready to drag him out like an intruder. Even then, the boy didn't step back. He carefully placed the folder on the counter, as if it were something sacred, and added, "I promised my grandpa I'd come here as soon as he passed. I'm sorry, but I'm not leaving without keeping that promise." The collective laughter in the room died for exactly 2 seconds. Only 2, until someone at the back shouted, "Show us, little millionaire. What's your fancy last name, eh?" The boy lifted his chin calmly, without anger, and answered clearly, "My name is David. David Andrews." That last name, so plain and ordinary, triggered another wave of mockery. "Andrews?" the manager repeated, laughing. "Never heard of it. Up here we only see last names that end up in magazines, kid, not names from a classroom attendance list." Everyone laughed again. Everyone except the boy. David was in mourning, but nobody there cared enough to notice. He was exhausted, but no one saw it. He was fulfilling a promise, but no one respected it. "Sir, could you just type this number into your system? That's all I need." The manager twisted his mouth into an ironic smile. "Fine. Since you're so insistent, I'll check it. I bet we're talking about some kid's bonus or a few spare dollars." The improvised audience burst out laughing again, but while the manager typed the account number into the computer, something began to happen. He froze. His eyes opened wide, and his smile vanished as if it had never been there. He tried typing again. Once more. And again. His hand started to tremble, and for the first time since the boy had walked in, no one was laughing. The manager swallowed hard, feeling his breath catch. "Kid, who exactly was your grandfather?" David simply met his eyes and replied, "The only person who never laughed at me." The manager blinked several times as though the screen were showing something impossible. He even slammed the mouse with his hand, unplugged and replugged the keyboard, then shoved his chair back a little, his face completely pale. The guests, noticing the shift in his expression, began to move closer. "What's going on?" the man with the champagne asked. "How much is in there anyway?" "Probably about $100 and a gift card," someone muttered, trying to provoke more laughter. No one laughed this time. Something was wrong. Something strange. Something far bigger than anyone in that room could have imagined. The manager cleared his throat, trying to hold himself together. "I need to confirm a detail in the internal system, all right? Just a second." David stood there watching him calmly, with a posture no one would expect from a 10-year-old. "Okay," he replied. "I'll wait." The manager shot out of his chair, hurried to a side door, and disappeared inside. Before closing it, he called another employee over in an urgent whisper. "Come with me. Now. You need to see this." The door closed. Silence returned. David remained absolutely still, his hand still resting on the clear folder. His eyes were wet, not from fear, but from memory. Under his breath, he murmured, "Grandpa, I'm doing what you asked. Don't leave me alone in this, okay?" No one heard him. With no one actively mocking the boy anymore, the crowd's scorn slowly turned into curiosity. A woman stepped closer and asked carefully, "Sweetheart, why did you want to come alone? Does your mother know you're here?" David shook his head without a hint of guilt. "My mom doesn't know I came today. She wanted to wait. But I promised my grandpa I would come as soon as he—" His voice faltered as he looked up toward the ceiling. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Some people began to shift uncomfortably. David went on, "I didn't come to take money. I just want to see the balance because my grandpa always said money tells a story, and that I'd only understand it when I saw it with my own eyes." Those words hit everyone who heard them like a blow to the conscience. Meanwhile, inside the private office, the manager was speaking rapidly and almost out of breath to an older man who seemed to be the branch superintendent, Richard Blake. "Look at this," the manager exclaimed, trembling as he turned the monitor toward him. "It's impossible. It has to be a system glitch." "There's no error," Richard answered after checking 3 times. "This account has been sealed for 10 years by court order. It could only be accessed when the miner presented the documents in person." The 2 men stared at each other in shock. "And the value?" the manager asked, sweating. "It's correct," the superintendent replied in a low, almost disbelieving voice. "This isn't an ordinary checking account. It's a private asset account. Investments, international funds, properties in trust. This isn't just a bank balance." The manager's throat went dry. So, this boy might be the legitimate heir to a massive fortune. He closed his eyes, ashamed of everything he'd said before. Outside, the silence stretched on until one of the guests finally asked, "Hey kid, do you have any idea how much money is in that account?" David took a deep breath. He didn't smile. His eyes didn't light up. There was no greed in his face. "No," he said. "I only know what my grandpa told me on the last night we talked, before he went to sleep for the last time. He said, 'When money is big, your heart has to be even bigger.'" Some people dropped their eyes, ashamed without knowing exactly why. Moments later, the door flew open. The manager reappeared, completely changed. His face was serious, his tone respectful, no longer arrogant. "David, would you please come with me to the private room?" "A private room?" someone repeated, incredulous. "For a kid?" The manager looked around the room, his gaze sharp. "No one here has any right to laugh at this boy. And believe me, none of you has what he has." The atmosphere shifted. David tightened his grip on the folder. He didn't move his feet immediately. "Can my mom come in with me?" he asked. The manager gave him a genuine, almost gentle smile. "Of course. Where is she?" David lowered his head. "She's working right now. She couldn't come. I came because I promised." The superintendent appeared behind the manager, his expression serious but deeply respectful. "Then while your mother is out working, we'll stand by your side," he said. "Because today, David, The world needs to treat you the way your grandfather wanted." The boy took a long breath, and for the first time since he'd entered that building, he looked like he might cry, not from sadness, but from relief. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'm ready." And he walked inside. The glass door of the private room closed behind him, and no one out there knew that this child was not simply going to look at a number. The room was small, with a light wooden table, 2 chairs, a lit desk lamp, and a monitor connected to the bank's internal network. There were no luxurious decorations, only silence. The manager shut the door carefully. Unlike how he'd burst through doors minutes earlier, he now wanted to make sure no one outside could hear anything, not a sound, not a breath, not an emotion. The superintendent pointed to the chair. "David, you can sit here. Don't be afraid. Nothing in here will hurt you." David sat slowly, his feet dangling above the floor. He set the clear folder on the table as if he were placing down a treasure, the only physical thing left from the person he had trusted most. "Inside that folder," the superintendent said calmly, "are the documents of a man who loved you deeply, and today is the day his last wish is fulfilled." David swallowed hard, holding his breath for a few seconds. "Did you know my grandpa?" he asked, hope in his eyes. The superintendent hesitated for a moment, then answered gently, "Not personally, but I know his story, and I know he didn't leave any of this to chance." David lowered his gaze. His grandfather had been his hero, his refuge, his best friend. He hadn't owned a mansion, a luxury car, or an expensive watch, but he had his word, his honor, and a look that always made David feel safe. "May I open the folder?" the manager asked, almost as if seeking permission. David nodded. The manager carefully opened it and took out 3 items: a sheet of official paper folded in thirds, a handwritten letter, and a small golden key. When David saw the letter, he felt a sharp ache in his chest. It was his grandfather's handwriting. He would have recognized it even with his eyes closed. It was the same handwriting he saw on the notes taped inside the closet, in the prayer on the refrigerator door, and in the poem about hope he kept under his pillow. "You can read it if you want," the superintendent said. David lifted the letter with both hands, took a deep breath, and began slowly. "My beloved grandson, if you're reading this, it's because I've already gone. Don't cry. I promised to stay by your side until the last day of my life, and I kept that promise. Now I need you to keep what I asked of you. Never be ashamed of who you are. The world will try to measure your worth with money. I measured yours by your character. If your money is big, let your heart be bigger." David's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't stop reading. "You were not born to be humiliated. You were not born to hide. You were born to choose your own path. I left something to help make that possible, but the true value is not in the amount." The letter shook in the boy's hands. The superintendent waited, then said kindly, "David, now we need to access the system, all right?" The boy simply nodded. The manager entered the account number, the access code, and the legal authorization. Then he typed in the grandfather's full name and confirmed the permission, including David's birth certificate. The screen began to load. At first, only folders appeared, then long strings of asset codes, funds, and transaction dates. Finally, one last line appeared. Total consolidated balance available upon presentation by the heir. A gray bar appeared, but the final number remained hidden, awaiting a last confirmation command. The manager gripped the mouse and took a deep breath. "Before we reveal it, David, I need to ask you an important question." The boy wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "Ask," he said. "Do you understand that every decision you make from now on could change your life forever?" David hesitated but answered firmly, "I do. My grandpa prepared me for this." The superintendent studied the boy's face and added, "There's only one final step. We have to confirm verbally that you truly want to see your balance now, without an adult relative present. Are you absolutely sure?" David looked at his own hands, at the letter, and at the golden key. He knew that if he backed out now, he might never find the courage again. "I want to see it," he said at last. The manager clicked. The screen began to reveal more details. Two words appeared first: consolidated assets. Then a long sequence of digits started to load, an immense amount, larger than anyone there had imagined. But before the total could fully appear, the system flickered. Everything froze for a second. Everyone in the room held their breath. David didn't blink. Just as the figure began to appear, someone pounded on the door and a voice shouted from outside, "Open up now! I need to speak to him!" The superintendent's eyes widened. "Who's there?" he called out. The voice answered, desperate, on the verge of tears. "I'm his mother. Don't let him see it alone." The door rattled on its hinges as she called again, "Richard, please!" Her voice trembled as if she had run for miles. The superintendent took a deep breath, signaled to the manager, and opened the door carefully. Mary, David's mother, ran in, out of breath, tears streaming down her face, still wearing her work apron as if she'd left her job halfway through a task. Her hair was hastily tied back, proof she hadn't had time to fix herself up. She rushed to her son and hugged him so tightly it was as if she'd found someone who'd been missing for years. David was stunned. He had no idea why his mother seemed so desperate. "Mom, what happened? I'm fine," he said. She held him by the shoulders, looking into his eyes as if searching for some invisible wound. You can't see it on your own. Don't you understand?" The superintendent tried to calm her. "Mrs. Andrews, your son is safe. We're just following protocol. He has full rights to the inheritance his grandfather left him." "I know that," she cut in, her voice breaking. "I know what my father left. But you don't know the rest. You don't know the weight that comes with it." David frowned. "Mom, you're scaring me." Mary rubbed her eyes, trying to pull herself together. She had never seemed fragile. She never cried. She always handled everything herself. But now it was as if the ground had disappeared under her feet. She sat down, took a deep breath, and said, "Before you see that number, you have to know something I've kept to myself for 10 years. Something that, if I could go back in time, I would have told you sooner." The superintendent stepped back a little, out of respect. David was confused and restless. "What could be so serious?" he asked. Mary looked at the letter on the table, the same letter she'd forbidden her son to open before the appointed day, the same letter she herself had never managed to read all the way through. With trembling hands, she spoke slowly. "David, your grandfather didn't just leave money." The boy's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Mary drew in a long breath, trying to summon courage. "He left a responsibility, a danger too, and I've spent your whole life trying to protect you from it." David felt even more lost. "Danger? What kind of danger?" Mary swallowed hard. "Son, the reason you grew up without a father has everything to do with this money." Silence fell. Not even the air conditioner seemed to make a sound. The superintendent leaned on the table, suddenly tense. "Ma'am, this is serious. You need to explain," he said. Mary pressed a hand to her chest, as if trying to hold her heart in place. "David's father didn't leave because he wanted to," she said. "He disappeared after he found out what your grandfather, his father, really had." David's face went pale. "Disappeared? How?" Mary hesitated, then continued. "He discovered that the fortune your grandfather left wasn't as simple as it looked. There were people who wanted it, people who couldn't accept that your grandfather had left everything to his grandson." The superintendent sank into his chair. "You're telling us this isn't just an inheritance," he said slowly. "It's more than that." "It's an old score that was never settled," Mary replied. David slowly closed his hand around the letter. He had always believed his father had walked out because he couldn't handle being poor, because he'd given up on his family. Now he was discovering things were very different. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me?" he asked. At last, the tears came freely. "Because I wanted you to have a childhood, son. That's all. I didn't want you living with your head on a swivel the way your father had to live." The superintendent exchanged a worried look with the manager. "Mrs. Andrews, does this put you at any risk now?" She nodded. "If the amount is as big as I think, yes, it does. And I won't let my son face that alone." David looked back at the computer screen, still half-loaded, the gigantic number still hidden like a sleeping monster about to wake. He took a deep breath. "Mom, I still have to see it. Grandpa left it for me. He trusted me. I can't run away." Mary cupped his face with a mixture of tenderness and fear. "I know, son. That's why I'm staying by your side now and always." The superintendent returned to his seat. "Shall we continue?" he asked gently. Mary squeezed her son's hand. "We can." The manager moved back to the monitor and rested the cursor on the final button. "David, once I click, the total amount will appear, and from that moment on, nothing will ever be the same. Are you sure?" The boy took a deep breath and answered with quiet certainty, "I am." The manager clicked. The screen began to reveal an absurd figure, a number that seemed to keep growing without end. Mary lifted a hand to her mouth, stunned. Before anyone could fully take it in, the door, which hadn't fully closed, swung open, and a tall, frightened-looking man rushed in, out of breath, shouting, "Stop! Don't show the balance!" Mary turned slowly, her voice barely audible. "It can't be." David felt his knees almost give way, because the man standing in the doorway was the one person he had spent years imagining, but never expected to see again. The room went utterly silent. The superintendent took an instinctive step back. The manager froze with his hand still hovering near the keyboard. It took several seconds before Mary could breathe again. The man at the door was pale and shaken, his chest rising and falling as if he'd been running for a long time. His stubble hinted at sleepless nights. His simple clothes made him look out of place among the marble, glass, and cold air conditioning. But his eyes told a whole story. "Don't show the balance," he repeated, now in a lower voice, a desperate plea. David was paralyzed. His body refused to move, but his eyes recognized something familiar in that face, even if his mind refused to understand how. Mary pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the room spin. I can't believe this," she stammered as tears flooded her face again. The man looked at her first, then at David. When their eyes met, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. It was as if, for a moment, they were the only three people there. He took a slow step forward, then another, and stopped 3 steps from the boy. "David?" he asked in a trembling voice, on the verge of tears. The boy swallowed hard. How do you know my name?" Mary tried to talk, but no sound came out. Her tears were now uncontrollable. The man closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a painful breath as if he were forcing himself to carry a weight he'd held for years. When he opened them again, his voice broke. "Because I'm your father." David felt the ground disappear beneath him. The word itself sounded foreign in his mouth. "My father?" he repeated slowly. The man nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I never abandoned you, son. Never. I know you grew up believing I did, but that's not what happened." Mary covered her face with both hands. The superintendent glanced at the security guard, worried. The manager didn't know whether to turn off the computer or call someone else in. David felt everything at once: anger, relief, suspicion, longing, even though he wasn't sure he had the right to miss someone he barely remembered. He took a deep breath, eyes brimming with tears. "If you're my father, then why did you disappear?" The man lowered his head as if the question had gone straight through his chest. He began, but his voice broke. He inhaled again and tried once more. "They threatened me. I couldn't stay. I couldn't risk you. Your grandfather knew. That's why he did what he did. The money wasn't a prize. It was the reason for the danger." Mary wiped her cheeks and finally found her voice. "You should have trusted me. We should have faced this together," she said, hurt but not hateful. He turned to her with a devastated expression. "I tried to come back, Mary. For years I looked for a safe way, but I never found one. I only found out your father had died when I went looking for him and realized time had run out." He looked back at the boy. I came today because I heard the balance was about to be shown. If that number appears, dangerous people could start hunting down whoever owns it. I can't let my son face the same risk I did." David fought back tears. "All I wanted was to check my balance," he whispered. "Now I don't even know if I want to anymore." His father stepped closer and put a hand on his shoulder. "David, that balance could change your life, but it could also turn everything upside down. The only thing that truly matters now is the truth." The boy stared at the frozen screen, at the loading bar stuck in place, and felt alone in front of a decision no adult in that room would have had the courage to make. The superintendent cleared his throat, trying to recover his professionalism. "Sir, if you really are David's father, we'll need to confirm your identity. But before that, I need to know whether you want us to go on or stop the process of viewing the balance." The air grew heavy. Everyone waited for the boy's answer, his father included. David turned to his mother. "Mom," he asked quietly, "what do I do?" Mary wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and answered with a voice full of love. "Son, you don't have to choose the money right now, but you do have to choose who you are and who you want to become from this moment on." The boy looked at his father, then at the screen, then at the letter. "Before I decide," he said, "I want to hear everything, the whole truth, from the beginning. No more secrets." His father took a deep breath, nodded slowly, and whispered, "Then it's time." He pulled a chair closer, sat down in front of his son, and got ready to speak. But before he could begin, the door opened again, and a woman stepped in, her expression serious, dressed in formal clothes, carrying a black briefcase. "I'm guessing I arrived at the perfect moment," she said. Everyone turned toward her. She walked in with firm steps and a direct gaze, showing neither fear nor surprise. She looked like someone used to delivering news that changes lives. She closed the door slowly, as if she wanted to keep out everything that didn't belong in this moment. "Good afternoon," she said calmly. "My name is Helen Ward. I've been your grandfather's attorney since before he passed away." Mary's head snapped up, surprised. David listened carefully. His father swallowed hard, visibly shaken. The lawyer studied the room for a few seconds, taking everything in. The frozen computer screen, the tension on each face, the air so thick it felt like a cold wind. "I came because I received an automatic notice from the bank's internal system," she explained. "It informed me that the balance access process had begun. That means the next instructions must be read now, before the final release." The manager raised a hand, confused. "But ma'am, we haven't even finished verifying the data yet." She gave him a brief nod. "That's all right. The will doesn't depend on the bank's approval. It's already official. You just need to hear the rest." David looked at her curiously. "The rest?" he asked. "There's more." Helen opened her briefcase, took out a thick envelope, and placed it on the table. It looked old, but carefully preserved. "Yes, David, your grandfather left more than money. He left an explanation, and it could only be read when you tried to check your balance for the first time." His father took a nervous breath, as if he knew what was coming, but hoped he was wrong. "Ms. Ward," he said, his voice slightly shaking, "are you sure this has to happen right now?" She held his gaze. "It was a direct order from your father-in-law, and he didn't give orders without a reason." David watched everything with his heart pounding. He couldn't explain why, but he felt that this woman was the key to everything that had been hidden for years. He pulled his chair closer to the table, sat up straight, and said, "Could you read it, please? I want to know what he wanted to tell me." The lawyer nodded and took a handwritten sheet from the envelope. The handwriting was strong, clear, and elegant, as if his grandfather had practiced every stroke for days. She drew in a breath, opened the letter, and began, "My dear grandson, if you're listening to this message, it's because you've grown up and because you chose to look for your balance. But before the number, you need to know your story. The truth was never hidden to hurt you, but to save you." David gripped the arm of his chair. Mary raised her fingers to her lips. His father bowed his head, close to breaking down. Helen continued reading. When your father disappeared, it wasn't because he abandoned his family. He was being watched. Dangerous people were getting too close, looking for something they thought we had, the password to money that wasn't theirs. He stepped away to protect you. He saved you, even though it meant you would hate him for it. Mary started to sob quietly. It wasn't sadness alone. It was relief and guilt mixed together. David looked at his father differently now. The lawyer went on, her voice steady. If you're checking the balance, it means there is finally enough safety for the truth to come out. But understand this clearly, David. The money is not the prize. It's simply proof that no one managed to destroy what belonged to our family. She paused briefly and turned the page. Now, my grandson, listen very carefully. This money will only be released if you choose the ending. Yes, there are options, and only you can decide what your life will be like from this day forward. David's eyes widened. Options? He whispered. Helen nodded seriously. Yes, 3. She set the envelope on the table. All 3 of them, mother, father, and son, stared at it, almost afraid to touch it. Your decision involves much more than money, she added, and before I tell you what the options are, I have to explain that your grandfather left a final recording in the bank system to be shown today. The manager swallowed hard. A recording, he repeated. Yes, the lawyer replied, and it can only be played if the father, the mother, and David are all present, exactly as you are now. The room went still. It felt as if the grandfather was still there, guiding everything even after his death. Helen turned to the manager. Please open the file labeled Video Will, Final Stage. The man's fingers trembled as he clicked through the system. The screen went black. A deep, slow, emotional voice filled the room. If you're listening to this, sit down. What I'm about to say changes everything. The screen stayed completely black for a few seconds. David clasped his hands between his knees as if trying to hold his heart inside his chest. Mary bowed her head, bracing herself for the worst. His father took a long breath, as if facing a past he'd never managed to bury. Then, at last, the image appeared. His grandfather sat in a simple armchair, wearing everyday clothes. No expensive watch, no mansion behind him, just a soft light on his face. He looked thinner than in the photos, but his gaze was full of truth, the same gaze David had. He began to speak as if he was still alive in that very moment. If you're seeing me, he said, it's because my grandson is old enough to understand the truth, and because my son no longer needs to live on the run. David's father closed his eyes and swallowed hard. The voice continued without anger or shouting, but with a weight impossible to ignore. I never wanted anyone here to become a slave to money. Money can buy many things, but it can destroy even more when it falls into the wrong hands. You've already seen that. My son, I'm sorry I didn't get to watch you grow. I prayed that you'd be protected, but I never prayed for you to become like us. You're different. You're the good part of this family. And that's why only you can choose. Mary cried silently. David's father trembled, his face flushed, holding back tears steeped in wounded pride. Then the grandfather held up a small card with a code on the back. This card opens the final vault, he said. Inside, there's an envelope containing your decision, but first you need to listen carefully to what each choice means. He raised one finger, like a teacher beginning a lesson. First option, you can receive the full amount immediately. You'll be a millionaire while you're still a child, but you will never again have a normal life. Many people will try to get close to you, to use you, to lie to you. You may gain money and lose your peace. He lifted a second finger. Second option, the money stays invested in secret. You'll only access it when you turn 21, with protection, supervision, guidance, and maturity, so you don't become easy prey. Everything will be legal and safe. David sat frozen. His grandfather took another deep breath. Third option, you can refuse the money. That would free you from everything that comes with this inheritance, from our family's mistakes and from the eyes that are always watching what does not belong to them." David's eyes widened. 3 choices, none of them easy. Then his grandfather turned slightly, looking off to the side, and added, "But before you choose, you need to hear from the one who never had a voice in all of this, your father." Mary covered her mouth with her hand. David's father bowed his head in defeat. The image cut to another video. His father sitting in a car, speaking quickly. He was thinner, with tired eyes, looking around nervously. "Son," he said, "if you ever see this, you need to know I never abandoned you. I disappeared because they tried to use me to steal your grandfather's money. I vanished to save you. They told me that if I didn't disappear, they would destroy you. I chose to disappear because I love you more than my own life." His voice broke at the end. This time, Mary sobbed openly. David began to cry quietly, trying in vain to hold back his tears. His father's message ended with one last sentence. "If one day you forgive me, I'll have gained more than any fortune." The screen went black. The room fell into total silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, the manager asked, "David, do you want to continue?" The boy wiped his tears with the back of his hand. He looked small in the chair, but inside he was enormous. "I do," he replied, firm and clear. The lawyer nodded, her own eyes shining. "Then the time has come to choose," she said softly, "and only you can speak now." David set his hands flat on the table, drew in a long breath, and closed his eyes. The room felt smaller than before, the air heavy, every second stretching into what felt like a full year. He stayed like that for a few moments, breathing deeply, as if talking quietly to someone inside himself. He wasn't an adult. He had no degree. He was not a businessman or an advisor, but he had something many adults had lost, a pure conscience. When he opened his eyes again, his hands no longer shook. He had decided. "May I speak?" he asked politely. The manager nodded. "Of course. The decision is yours." David looked at his father first. There was no hatred or reproach in his gaze, only an attempt to understand what he still didn't know. "When I walked in here," he began, "I thought I wanted money, because everyone talks about it, because it looks like only people with money matter." His mother cried in silence. His father looked at him as if seeing his own son clearly for the very first time. "But now I understand that money doesn't make you who you are. It just shows who you already are, and I'm still growing. I don't even know who I'll be yet." He turned toward the lawyer and the manager. "If I had that money now, people would try to buy me. They'd follow me. They'd treat me differently. I'd become a target, not a person." He took another steady breath that sounded more like that of a grown man than a child. "So I don't want to be rich right now. I want to be a kid first." A beautiful silence followed, full and genuine. The manager leaned forward. "Then what is your decision?" David's eyes shone but didn't waver. "I choose the second option. Invested, hidden, protected. I'll only get involved when I have an adult's maturity." Helen adjusted her glasses, visibly moved. "That is an exceptionally wise decision, David." But the boy kept speaking, looking at the adults as if he were giving the world a piece of advice. "I don't want to grow up too fast. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be everyone's provider. I want to study, have normal friends, play, make mistakes, learn, without people trying to buy my smile." Mary began to cry harder, but now it was a cry of relief. Then came the twist no one expected. "But," David said, lifting one finger, "I do have one request." Everyone stared at him. "I want part of the money to be used now," he said, "but not for me." The manager's eyes flew wide. "What for, David?" The boy answered with the simplicity of a child and the wisdom of someone who had already lived 1,000 years. "To help other kids who never had a real chance, children who go to bed hungry, whose schools are terrible, no one asks how they're doing, kids who think they were born to lose." Mary covered her mouth again, overwhelmed. His father closed his eyes, feeling something inside him collapse. Helen placed a hand on her chest. The manager had to draw in a slow breath. David, a 10-year-old boy, went on, "I want part of that money to become opportunities for children who were born invisible, because nobody deserves to start life completely alone." No one took a selfie. No one applauded. No one recorded a video. Yet that moment branded itself into the memory of everyone present as one of the most beautiful days that Bank had ever seen. Helen asked in a trembling voice, "And how much would you like to donate?" He smiled with genuine simplicity. "Enough to change a lot of stories," he said, "but not so much that it wipes out mine." Everyone understood. For a child prodigy, it would have sounded brilliant. For a seasoned entrepreneur, it would have been strategic. For a wounded adult, it might have felt impossible. But for a child with a pure heart, it was simply obvious. The manager closed his laptop, discreetly wiped the corner of his eye and said, "From today on, David, you're not just an heir, you're also a founder." David's eyes widened. "Founder of what?" The manager gave him a small, sincere smile. "Of the Andrews Foundation. Children who deserve a tomorrow." Mary embraced her son for the first time without fear of breaking him. His father stepped closer, like someone returning from an emotional exile, knelt in front of David and said with a voice cracked by truth, "Son, I have never in my life felt so proud of anyone." David wasn't seduced by the money. He simply hugged his father. That hug was worth more than any vault. The bank fell quiet as they left. It no longer felt like the same place where, only minutes before, tension, fear, and hunger for scandal had filled the air. Now, the only thing anyone felt was respect, not for the money, but for the goodness of the child. David walked slowly down the stairs, holding his mother's hand. His father followed closely behind, as if he wanted to be sure nothing bad would ever happen to his son again, not in that building, not at home. Outside, the night air was cool, and the breeze seemed to clear away the stale air of old fears to make room for a new chapter. "Do you want to go get something to eat?" Mary asked. David thought for a few seconds. Before, he might have asked for a burger, a pizza, a milkshake, an ice cream, everything a kid would ask for with a full heart. But now, something inside him had changed. "Maybe later," he replied. "I want to go home first." His parents exchanged a startled look. They'd never heard him speak like that, without anxiety, without hurry, just with peace. They got into the car. The city outside was the same, but somehow it looked different. When the car stopped in front of their building, his father turned off the engine and faced his son. "Son, I need to ask your forgiveness," he said. David looked at him calmly. "Forgiveness? For what?" His father took a few seconds to gather his courage. When he finally spoke, his words were not polished, but they were true. "I spent years dreaming of who I wanted you to become," he admitted, "and I never stopped to ask who you wanted to be." Mary took a deep breath, holding back her emotions. David shook his head with a maturity that didn't fit his 10 years. "It's okay, Dad," he said. "Now we can start the right way." They went inside. David was exhausted, but it wasn't a physical tiredness. It was the weight of having laid his own soul bare for the first time. He went to his room, closed the door, and sat on his bed. He picked up his grandfather's box, which had been open since the moment everything began. Inside, besides the banking documents, there was an old photograph of his grandfather with a child David didn't recognize, probably his father when he was young. From the bottom of the box, a smaller envelope slipped out. David caught it. It was another letter from his grandfather. On the front it read, "For David, open only when you understand the value of everything." The boy felt a shiver run through his whole body. It was as if the letter knew exactly which day it was. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was firm, written as if with his very soul. "My little David," it said, "if you're reading this, it's because you understand that life is more than possessions. Don't let money define who you are. Use it only when you know how to protect what no one can buy: character, courage, and compassion." David closed his eyes for a few seconds. The letter went on. And when the world feels heavy, remember this: a heart that helps is worth more than a hand that grabs. The words seemed alive, as if his grandfather were sitting right beside him. At the end, one sentence stood out, written with extra emphasis. Wealth is only a tool. The truly rich person is the one who knows who they live for. David smiled slowly, not an outward smile, but an inward one. He got up from the bed, opened his desk drawer, and put the letter away as if he were storing the future in a safe. Then he took a blank sheet of paper, sat down, and began to write. He titled it Project 1. My first mission: find children near my city who need real, urgent help. Beneath that he added, and I'll look every one of them in the eyes. David didn't want to be rich. He wanted to be useful. In the living room, his father and mother talked softly for the first time in years. No yelling, no accusations, no competition over who was right. They talked about the future, not about shame or fear. When David came out of his room, his father jumped a little, startled. Everything okay, son? David smiled. I'm fine. I just need 3 things, Dad. What are they? His father asked. A notebook, a pencil, and someone who believes in me. His father swallowed hard. You already have all of that, he said. And you also have a family. David stepped closer, set the notebook on the table, and said, I want to start something big, but first, something small. I want to help one child before I try to help the whole world. Can you help me find the first one? His father took a deep breath and replied, holding back tears, I'll help you find every single one. That was the moment he finally understood. He hadn't lost his son. He had just found him. The next morning, the house felt different. No shouting, no frantic rushing, no heavy air from the past. For the first time, his father knocked on the bedroom door. May I come in? He asked. David smiled slightly. Yes, Dad. The man walked in slowly, carrying a bag. I brought you something, he said. I think it's time. Inside was a new backpack, simple and black, without any flashy brand, but full of meaning. This is for when you go out to help someone, his father said. Every mission needs a backpack. David slipped it on and let out a soft laugh. Now I really look like a superhero. You don't just look like one, his father replied. You are one. Mary appeared shortly after, setting the breakfast table, something that hadn't happened in years, toast, fruit, hot chocolate, and a note in the middle. The greatest wealth is what we do with what we feel. David read it, breathed deeply, and said, After breakfast, I want to go out and find someone who needs help. His parents agreed. Before leaving, David went to the hallway where a framed photo of his grandfather hung, his smile wide and peaceful, the smile of someone who had understood life. The boy placed his hand on the frame and whispered, Thank you, Grandpa. I'll honor you. When they stepped outside, the world seemed larger, more alive, full of possibilities. As they walked, his father asked, How are we going to find this first child? David answered without thinking, Life shows you when you're looking in the right direction. And life did. In the square, a little girl sat alone on a bench in a torn school uniform, an old notebook on her lap. She turned the pages slowly, trying to figure out an exercise. But she had no pencil. Hi, how are you? David asked with a smile as he approached. The girl looked up, not used to anyone paying attention to her. Hi, she said shyly. I'm trying to do my homework, but I don't have a pencil, and I can't go home yet. There's no one there right now. David glanced at his parents. He didn't look for something sensational. He didn't turn her pain into a drama. He didn't pity her. He felt empathy. He reached into his backpack and took out the first item he'd put in that morning, a new pencil case filled with pencils, an eraser, and a sharpener. Here, he said. Now you can finish. The girl held it with both hands as if it might vanish. Is this real? She asked. Of course it is, David answered, but there's one condition. She swallowed nervously. What condition? David smiled gently. When you're older, help someone else too. The girl nodded, eyes full of tears. His parents watched from a distance, holding back their own tears, not because of money, but because of the person their son was becoming. As they walked home at dusk, his father placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Now I understand, son," he said quietly. "You weren't born just to be a millionaire. You were born to be someone the world will never forget." David took a deep breath, feeling the evening breeze on his face. "Grandpa always said money is only worth it if it helps someone sleep better at the end of the day," he said. "Tonight, someone's going to sleep better." In that moment, his father realized something important. The money hadn't changed his son. His son had changed the meaning of money. When they got home, David went back to his notebook and wrote on the cover, "Project Legacy, Turning Wealth into Stories." On the first line he wrote, "The rich aren't the ones who have a lot. The rich are the ones who multiply what is good." He closed the notebook, set the pen down, and whispered, "This was the beginning." And if this story moved you, then before you walk away, imagine doing 3 small things. Think, "I want to do good." Remind yourself to look for those who need help, and stay ready for the next story that might touch your heart even more than this one.